Hi, everybody. My name's Edwin. I'm the 2025-2026 San Francisco Bay Area president. Excited to be here and answer you guys' questions. I'm going to do a quick overview of what you guys watched in my video. I know there was some technical difficulty where the slides might have not shown up. The team was awesome and they fixed that. So in case you didn't see my slides, go back and watch the recording. But I'll be here answering some questions. I'll start with a quick overview. What is succession planning in elections? Just making sure that your board is healthy year over year and we maintain sustainability across all of our chapters and all of our partners, whether it be corporate or with other nonprofits, and how do we maintain a centralized knowledge location. So let's get started and let's get into some questions if you guys have any questions.
Okay, well, we do have some questions just to start off. My name is Nina Torres. I'm the Region 5 Vice President, and I'm a Senior Director at CELUS. So, Edwin, how do you proactively identify potential leaders within your chapter, and what qualities do you look for in these individuals?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really people who are eager to be leaders, right? Especially if people had already served as leaders at their college. So we just look for people who are really eager to get involved, and eventually they'll start rising up for during events. They'll start connecting with all the officers, or they'll constantly be asking like, "Hey, where can I help? Is there other places that we can volunteer in?" Yeah, so those are the key aspects that we look for.
Awesome. Any specific qualities that you look for whenever they're volunteering or anything like that? Anything there?
Yeah, just making sure that they're organized and professional and they're able to communicate well.
Yep, definitely agree. What role does internal professional development play in preparing potential successors for chapter leadership roles?
Yeah. So how do we prepare roles for people for the roles?
Yep, potential successors.
Yeah. So we have the one-on-one transition document. So it's the document that has all of the active action items that they need to go over, any resources they should go over. And so that's a one-on-one. And then we have office retreats at the beginning of fall and at the beginning of winter. So around the beginning of January. And then that's where we have like a retreat where we all make sure that we're on the same page. We review like the officer procedures, how do we fill out the CMT, the reporting programs, things of that nature.
Yeah, making sure they join CCLP.
Exactly.
What's the biggest challenge that you encounter with succession planning at your chapter?
The biggest challenge. I think this was early on. I think one of our biggest challenges was making sure that we had enough time to properly train our incoming board members. And that's why in the presentation I said like start as early as possible. Tap people who might be potentially interested. We do have the potential officer mixer where again it's a non-official way to get that conversation started. And then we have the transition document that really has it started. So, biggest tip is get started as as early as you can when it comes to this training.
Agreed. Will you do your one-on-one board 2 check-ins?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
It says, will you do your one-on-one board 2 check-ins? So I'm assuming checking in with the board
As
one-on-one.
president, yeah. So in my slides, I have a one-on-one. So outside of the retreat, outside of our regular officer board cadence, the president meets one-on-one, and this is over coffee or over dinner, just to really connect with them and understand, like, hey, how are you doing personally? Like, are you comfortable with the workload? Do you want to take on more? Um, are you worried of any hiccups on the board? Are there any like basically going like a personal SWOT analysis, like you as a individual, as a board member, just making sure that we're connecting with everybody to see and avoid any potential mishaps. If somebody eventually says like, hey, I'm working for a promotion at work, so I might have to step back a little bit, that's totally fine. That's what the one-on-ones are for. Like making sure we keep a pulse on our other board members and making sure that we understand like how right, because we are people too. So life happens sometimes, but we just want to make sure that we have that constant communication.
Yeah, love that. What steps do you take to ensure voter turnout and engagement within your chapter elections?
Yeah, that's again starting as early as possible and start advertising and start reaching out to any lifetime members that you have of your chapter, any already paid members. Start getting people registered as paid members earlier on too, and really use all methods that you have at your disposal. So again, if you start ahead of time, you should have a couple events before elections. So that's where you could start interacting with them. Like, hey, don't forget to vote. Like, and then walk them through it. Also through social media, through any communication methods you may have, newsletters, Discord or WhatsApp or wherever you have your communications. That's a great way to making sure like people are constantly seeing these notifications. Like, hey, it's time to vote.
Yeah. And something else that I'll add is definitely one-on-one, reminding people every time you see them, make sure to vote. Other than the top 4 executive board positions, which other roles do you think are critical and why?
I think they're all critical because every board or every role that we have should align with the pillars of SHEP. So we have community service, right? We have all these pillars that we want to make sure that we're fulfilling. But I think it goes across the board, right? We're creating a pipeline really from that K-12 pipeline with SHEP Junior, with that collegiate, and then early professionals, and then late professionals. So we want to make sure that we're tapping, that we're making sure that people are exposed to SHEP throughout the pipeline. And so we have officer roles that kind of cater to that.
Yeah. So we have a correction to a previous question. So it said, how often do you do your one-on-one check-ins?
At the moment we have 9. So I try to do it as needed. So maybe like every 3-4 months, every quarter, I really try to meet with online board members. So that may mean that I meet virtually with some people, meet with some people in person, but I try to meet with all 9 maybe every quarter.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of documentation that needs to be generated by the current board to transfer to the next board. What are the tools that you use to store and manage those critical documents? Great question.
Yeah, we have a centralized location of knowledge. So that's the Google Drive folder that's owned by the chapter. All the documents, at least on our side, when we use Google Drive, all those documents should be owned by that Gmail, by the SFBA Gmail. We've run into the problem where some officers, they make some assets and they forget to transfer that. So, we just like to remind our officers too, like any documentation that they might generate, to making sure that the board email is the the owner, and then we have the centralized location, and then we have a transition document. Really, it's like 1-2 pages. This is like, hey, here are the critical items that you should know incoming into your role.
Awesome. And kind of on that same guideline, so which materials should outgoing officers prepare for their successors? Like checklists, contact rosters, any budget histories?
Yeah, I review that in the decks and making sure that you guys go take a look at that. But it's everything, right? It's hey, here's the resources you should know. Here are ongoing action items. Here's a history of events that your role has specifically led. And again, we go over to the training with all the incoming board members to like, hey, here's a historical. We go back a couple years using the CMT, and then we also have the president's transition document that reviews like the calendar of events for the previous years, just so people are aware of like, here's the historical context. This is where we'll move forward. So CMT, president's document, and the officer transition document. I think those are the three main ones that should have all the information that your new officer should need.
Yeah, awesome. There's some really good questions in here. How do you hold leaders accountable for fulfilling their role and action items?
Yeah, I mean it's daily check-ins, right? Everybody has like personal lives too, and so you give them well enough notice, like in any assignment that they may have, and then just periodic check-in, like, hey, how are you doing? How's this going? They'll check in. You know, we have our regular cadence of officer meetings, and so we run through all of the action items, like, hey, what's the status on this? What's the status on that? If we notice that something is at risk of falling through the cracks, that's where me as president, I step in, right? I make sure that we have the longevity of our chapter. So if I start noticing any risks, I start reaching out to them like, hey, do you guys need help? I'll start taking things off people's plates, or start be able to like delegate, like, hey, who has bandwidth? Is anybody able to take this on? And it's nothing personal, right? Like, I understand like personal lives happen, but I think for a community's sake too, like we want to make sure that we have these events, and so we try to really balance the load.
Awesome. Has your chapter ever faced a period where you had empty board positions, and how did you address it?
Yeah, when we have open board positions, I think in the previous years, I think with COVID, it's been hard to kind of recruit people and meet new people that are interested in being leaders. So when that time comes, like we try to distribute the duties across our board members.
For your example, what has been the most reliable communication methods in your chapter in terms of response and engagement?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if it's something like immediately important, I'm like, hey, like, there's a risk, I'll text them. But we've transitioned from Slack to Discord. And so some professionals aren't that much aware of Discord. So they've had like a learning curve there. But Discord is like our main form of communication when it comes to officers, was like immediate, like I am like, when you just message people there. And then for more official notes, or for more official communication, we use emails.
Awesome. Lots of great material about engaging new members to run for the chapter board. But how do you convince current board members to return or take higher responsibility roles like president or VP?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think eventually, like if people are really interested in being leaders, that's when you kind of guide them a little bit. Like if they're absolutely opposed to returning and they don't want to rise up to president, there's really nothing that you could do, right? But I think as friends, as the board members eventually become your friends, like you have honest conversations, like, hey, would you be able, or would you want to continue on another year? Would you want to take on another role? And just seeing like the people who are eager, they'll start showing themselves like, hey, I want to take more on. Hey, I'm going to be interested in running for VP or president, right? They'll start having these conversations that you could then kind of build about, like, hey, like, okay, if you want to start attending more, like, come shadow us at the president's call, and start showing them like visibility of like, hey, this is what the president does or VP does, right?
Yeah. Kind of on that same wavelength, what are some questions you get from people who are considering running for an e-board position?
Yeah, we the questions like we get asked is like, how big is the workload? What is the commitment? And so that's when we communicate like, hey, board to board, the cadence, the officer cadences could change, right? I've been on the board where we met weekly. We also met like once every 2 weeks. But the communication is constant throughout, like whatever method that we use, whether it be like Slack or Discord. And then it depends on one main event. So we try to have the officers host and spearhead one main event that's related to their role. But aside of that, they're playing assistant or support roles for other events. And we understand if you can't attend all events. We have so many events, but it's just having that clear communication channel.
Yeah, love that. I like the idea of the officer outings and inviting other members to encourage succession. How often do y'all do this, and how exactly do y'all plan this differently, like a regular social event?
Yeah, this is only for people that we've noticed that are interested into potentially taking on leadership roles. So again, during our events, these are non-official, forms of communication that they have in terms of like, hey, what does it take to be an officer? Once they start asking those questions, we could ask, like, would you be interested? Like, we're having this event, so it's just for the board members and for potential incoming board members. We have that a couple months before elections, just so again we could open that channels officially, like, hey, this is what it takes. But we also have like an activity that's going on, and they're able to interact with all the board members and really focus on the roles and responsibilities. We get into like details there.
And how is it planned differently than a regular event? How do you get the interest forms? Like, where are you going to go?
No, it's all like
things like
every officer is in charge of almost trying to find their successor. And so every officer would come and they would suggest one or two people that we should invite, and they get a personal invite from us. There's no interest form. Everything is like through word of mouth.
Very cool. We are currently deciding between Slack and Discord. What made your organization choose Discord, and what are its advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah. And there's a third one too, WhatsApp too. I think there's so many, and there's pros and cons. My specific focus was I saw a lot of collegiate chapters in our region use Discord already. And so what I was able to do was connect our Discord and do, I believe it's called webhooks. And so when we make an announcement on one of our channels, it automatically gets spread out to all of the collegiate chapters. And so we encourage more students to join in. Eventually, when the students join, they're already on our chapter. So my main focus was really to catch them as they're graduating, like when they're still in college, and hoping that they continue on using Discord. I think with Slack too, we were using it, and we saw. Oh, also for Discord, that's where we meet virtually during our officer cadences. So Discord has free video calls, and it doesn't delete our messages. And so that's one thing that we saw with Slack. Slack, I think they delete your messages after like 60 days, and you're not able to do video calls. We've had some events too where we've live streamed events. So in case people weren't able to make it in person, we've live streamed from Discord. So those were really the pros and cons from that, and why we decided to go with Discord. It was just like they have all these extra features for free that Slack just didn't have.
Oh, super cool. I didn't know about that. The way that they can announce that's super cool.
Mhm.
Have you ever had a situation where you see an idea on the board that is not suitable for the chapter?
You know, we try to make sure that all of our events align with the SHEP pillars. If they don't align with the SHEP pillars, um, you know, it's not really worth our time. And I think there's so many ideas out there too that, you know, do they align with the SHEP pillars? Do we have bandwidth for it? Do we, right? We take all these things into consideration, like when deciding what type of events we should have.
Yeah, I know that. I think those are all the questions in the QA. I guess one last question that we have here. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of the elections process and succession planning after each transition?
Yeah, the effectiveness of it is we meet, so we make sure that we look at the numbers, like how many people voted, how many people saw like each post like, on Instagram, LinkedIn, things like that. And then during the officer transition document, if they didn't meet with the officers already, you know, we just have multiple layers. So one with your transition document, making sure that officers get trained there. Two with the retreat, and then there at the retreat, I start running through everything that they should know. And again, I make it interactive as we can, or the president will make it as interactive as he can. But also we take mental notes of like, okay, they are not aware of this, but you know, we're covering everything now. They're not aware of this document or this procedure or this context, and making sure like, hey, this is something that we should know moving forward. And then we have regular during our officer cadence, we make sure that we have any housekeeping things addressed first. So whether people have filled out their event worksheets or updated the CMT or check their calendars, we have general housekeeping tasks at the beginning of our officer meetings.
Speaking of the CMT, we have a question about it. During onboarding and or transition time, what role does the chapter management tool play in the handoff process?
Yeah, I mean, we personally have not had our retreat yet, but during the retreat, what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up the CMT. We're gonna look at NRP1 for 2024, and we're going to walk through all of the events, all of the roles, like all of the just so people could see like, okay, this is what we did in the previous year. This is what worked, right? The CMT outlines everything that worked, that didn't work, lessons learned. So we'll walk through line by line, like, hey, and this is making sure that every officer, whether it's like related to the position or not, has context of those events, and then we'll just walk down the CMT.
How do you encourage members to get a professional membership?
Yeah, and we ask them like, hey, are you paid member? You should really join. Some people like they have lifetime members who are their mentors. So we encourage people to like, if your mentor is a lifetime member, ask if they can sponsor them. Being a lifetime member. So we just again try to have those interactions, and it's a slow growth, right? Like at the beginning, like maybe they're just regular members. They don't end up being paid members, but eventually, if we see them so often, again during elections is a good time to remind them like, hey, you have to be a paid member to vote. And then we walk through all of the procedures from there to making sure that they become paid members.
Yeah. Also remind them that once they graduate, they get a free year of professional membership.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've also seen where corporate, they reach out to their companies, and if they're an IPC, then they get a membership as well. So definitely just, encourage them to reach out to their company as well.
Mm-hmm.
What recommendations do you have for campaigning for an executive board position?
Yeah, I mean, what we do personally is that we have people submit a personal statement, and then we just like send it out in like the Google Forms, and like, hey, here are just a couple paragraphs about who they are and why they want to run for the role. We don't make it like a big campaign where, like people start posting like on Instagram or stuff like that. Like everybody gets a one-sheeter. This is your promotional, like try to convince them in a couple pages. And again, like if you start earlier on, people can ask has been questions like, oh, what would you do if you're president? What would you do if you would in this role? Yeah, so everything, well in advance, making sure that they have time to ask the candidates questions based off of the personal statements.
Yeah. I think we have time for one last question. How do you involve your team in identifying future needs to help you with succession planning, especially because some roles need to change based on evolving chapter needs?
So we have, again, regular officer cadence, and we go through everything that we have planned, any action, any information. And I think it's also my job as president, and I lean on my VP to look at long term, right? I trust that my officers are able to take care of their events that they need to take care of, right, next month or next month or two. But as president, I want to make sure they have that visibility a couple of months down the road. So we're already planning events through September through November, and we have our officers who are stepping in for that. Once those officers are comfortable with the procedures there, then we move on. I move on to the next thing. Like, okay, but we're constantly looking down the road. Like, hey, what risks are we running into? Do we need to pivot here? Do we need it? Right. I think that's my role as president is having that foresight of making sure we have like one eye into the future.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to squeeze in one more question. What do you think SHEP can do to help encourage more professionals to become regional and/or chapter leaders?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, honestly, like I think having that community, making sure that we, SHEP National at the regional level too, we show up as a community. So when we host regional events, making sure that everybody feels welcomed, making sure that it's beyond just our local chapter, right? That we're collaborating with other chapters, that other officers are informed of, hey, this is what's going on at the national level, at the regional level. And maybe through the exposure, they would be interested in making like a larger impact in the organization.
Yeah. Well, I know we are coming up on time, so I do want to encourage everyone to make sure to watch those on-demand videos. You do have to watch them all the way through to get credit. You can't just open and close them. And thank you, Edwin, for all of the great advice throughout these questions. Thank you to the audience for such great questions. And thank you so much. Can't wait to see what the rest of the sessions come up with.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.